you as a user gets to connect and own this data so that nobody ever gets to see it without your permission, right? And then the third thing, which is interesting, is we want to make sure that this almost becomes a complete data enrichment platform.
These teams either get our data and they're going to try to monetize the profit off of it, or we have custody over our own data and we can choose what we do with it.
But we're kind of running into a headway here where OpenAI is set to go public at $1 trillion valuation, $1 trillion IPO. Welcome back to The Roll Up.
This is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy it. Alrighty, guys, we are live from SmartCon. Welcome back to AI Supercycle. This is episode number 9. We have Terence Kwok, who is building the human layer for Web3. Again, AI Supercycle is brought to you guys by Near. Check out near.ai for their private chat product. And of course, again, we have Terence today joining us, the co-founder of Humanity Protocol, bringing this kind of human-centric world to this AI world that we're bringing in today. We're live from New York City. Terence, good to have you
so
on.
much for calling in, Terence. It's an absolute pleasure. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Wish I were in New York.
Yeah, man. Today was a big day for humanity. You guys have just announced a partnership with Mastercard. I'd like to get into that, but I think before we do, maybe you could just paint this picture of this kind of futuristic AI agentic world that we're entering in when it comes to payments, when it comes to identity, and really just kind of where Humanity Protocol fits in, and just generally what your thesis is.
Sure. I think, I'm a consumer of AI. I use ChatGPT, I use Grok, I use all this stuff every day. I think there's a lot of people in tech are very excited about the possibilities for AI. For AI in the traditional tech world, or even in the blockchain space. But I think for us, we are trying to create infrastructure that solves some of the problems that will come out because of AI. Right. If you look at, the last couple of years, it's already becoming very difficult for us to differentiate online what is a human being and what's not. With text, it's pretty much impossible. Bot accounts on social media, on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, it's already impossible to tell. And then recently with deepfake photos, images, Sora, it's becoming impossible to tell whether essentially something is a person or not, something is real or not. And so what we're trying to do with Humanity Protocol is essentially leveraging blockchain to create a trust layer for the internet, not just necessarily for Web3, but for the entire, entire internet world. And the premise for us is, starting with figuring out whether somebody is a human being or not, but using that as a basis for verifying many different attributes of a human being. So it might be your education, it might be your employment status, KYC, identity, nationality, and then as Andy mentioned just a couple hours ago, we announced a big partnership with Mastercard, where they're issuing banking credentials on Humanity. So there's the ability for people to even verify their off-chain assets, your credit score, how many shares of Tesla you own in your brokerage account. All of this done in a privacy-preserving way, such that ultimately the data is owned and controlled by the users themselves, and they get to share with whoever they want, whenever they want, in a privacy-preserving way. So that's sort of what we're doing. And the reason why we think this is important is because I don't think enough people think about sort of when AI is everywhere, the challenges of making sure that people are telling the truth. A lot of people are already not telling the truth online. It's pretty, sorry, give me 1 second. It's pretty trivial to create a social media account, LinkedIn account, put whatever the hell you want on there. So it's already very difficult to verify things, right?
Yeah.
And then beyond that, right? We think when you have AI agents roaming around. How do you allow these AI agents, even if you give them permission, to access some of this data in a permissioned way? These are all the things that we're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
My
Um,
thumb is a little bit fucked. I'm missing it.
No, you're all good.
you're good, Terrence. So yesterday we had Adrian Wall, who was speaking to the UN about digital sovereignty. And he's been a real big proponent of this. And he kind of spoke about taking back control of our data. He really helped to explain the why this is important, how big data companies are profiting off of our data and not kicking back anything back to the people who rightfully own that data, us as the individuals. It's really you guys at Humanity that are doing that are solving the how, right? The technology and the infrastructure that is being put into place ultimately to help reconfigure the digital sovereignty of the world and reestablish our data in the rightful owners. Could you talk about uh, how this partnership with Mastercard ultimately gives people their data back? How do we open up the data flow so that we have custody of our own data rather than just opening up permission, kind of giving these companies permission to access our data, and then they get a foot in the door and they get access to everything? Is it piece by piece? How do we make sure that we custody our own data, and then once we have it, what can we do with it? What does this unlock for the end user?
Yeah, so I think there are two things that we're solving for, right? And I mentioned for humanity, we're doing a bunch of different types of credentials. So we're solving for two things, right? Number one is how do we ensure that it is somebody's telling the truth? If I tell you that I have $1 million, how can you know that that's real? That's number one. And number two is provided that I do have $1 million, how do I allow third parties to access this information in a verifiable way without me oversharing things, right? I might just want you to know that it's a true or false statement that I have $1 million in the bank account, not necessarily the exact amount that I have, or other pieces of information that comes with, me screenshotting a bank statement, of which, back to the whole truth piece, I could easily Photoshop that also. Right. So what we're creating is essentially a network where trusted parties, for example, Mastercard, maybe it's your university, maybe it's the company that you work for, can act as identity validators to issue credentials so that certain pieces of information are verified to be true, encrypted, stuck onto the blockchain, and then ultimately, me as the human being, I get to share this information uh, piecemeal with whoever I want, and that's done through APIs, SDKs. We're rolling out smart contracts across a number of different blockchains for applications to be able to make use of this, right? And in the Web3 space, right, like you get to be able to prove, for example, you're not sanctioned, you're KYC'd. Maybe it's unlocking under collateralized loans, non personal loans, without necessarily putting collateral, because I prove that I have X amount of money in the bank, and these credentials we can make sure that it's refreshed in real time, right? Or even looking at the RWA space, looking at stablecoin payments. A lot of countries are looking at more regulated rails for stablecoins, right? And a lot of the RWA platforms right now are still going through traditional KYC routes, right? What if we could actually have reusable credentials, simply saying, hey, you know what? Terrence is KYC'd already with JP Morgan. And so, we trust that he's not sanctioned. And, if need be, we can get that information from him, whenever we want. Right. So that sort of thing. And this actually also translates into the Web2 world, right? Where, there are many different situations where somebody has to prove where they went to school. Currently, the way you do it is you have to have a company and call up your university, ask them to issue a graduation certificate officially. That takes a couple weeks, a couple $100. What if, there's a reusable credential saying that, Terrence actually went to this university, graduated with this GPA, right? Or, for example, maybe it's even asset proofs when you're renting a new apartment. You have to prove how much money you have or your income statements, right?
Yeah.
Right now, there are two problems with that. Number one, it's very cumbersome. Number two, you're oversharing on a lot of information that you might not want to share or need to share. And number three, what you're sharing, if you're malicious, might not even be true because you could just Photoshop and create a fake statement, right? So we're solving for sort of the access problem. We're solving for the convenience problem, as well as we're solving for truth.
Relay, low fees, lightning speed, and the power of multi-chain at your fingertips. Instant multi-chain payments. Choose any token on any chain. 75 plus networks supported. More than 5 million users. 8 billion plus volume processed. 70 million plus transactions. Fast, reliable, everywhere. Start swapping today. Only on Relay. The wait is over. The Talus testnet is live. Be part of the revolution. Join now at testnet.talus.network. Hibachi. Provable. Trade perps with speed and security. Earn rewards. Visit hibachi.xyz. Trading on fire.
And the platform that you guys have to help bolster this truth and bolster this is human ID, right? This is kind of the core technology piece of Humanity Protocol that you've integrated into Mastercard. A little bit more about this partnership. You guys integrated into Mastercard's open finance connectivity platform. Could you just describe what the integration process was like? When you were kind of going through the early innings of this partnership with Mastercard. We heard yesterday, actually, when some of these institutional partnerships happen, it's almost like a consulting relationship. You're coming in, you're teaching the company about what decentralized identity can provide to them. Is that how this started? Do you guys help enable and help teach Mastercard some of the primitives that are available on chain, and then start to show them the technology and show them what's possible? Maybe you could just tell the story and walk us through the steps of closing a massive institutional partnership with Mastercard.
So this just took a long time, right? I mean, it took almost like a year of discussions and integrations and developments. I mean, Mastercard historically people know them for their credit card business, right? But obviously there's their open finance sort of arm of the company essentially facilitates data sharing between banks. So right now, for the Human ID, if you actually go to our web app, which is app.humanity.org, and sign up for an account, and yeah, I think you have an account already. So if you actually literally go to the site, what you'll see is the ability for you to connect any bank. Starting with the U.S., we're starting with the U.S. right now, and then we're going to be expanding into Europe and then the rest of the world over the coming months. You will already be able to connect any through the Mastercard data connectivity platform, any bank in the US, and be able to prove a number of different things, right? Maybe it's even as simple as proving that you have uh, over X amount of dollars in your account. And so what is happening there is then automatically once you do that, a credential is being issued on Humanity Protocol and signed by Mastercard to verify that this credential is true. And then through zero knowledge proofs, with our SDKs and APIs, a third party will be able to ask you for permission to to check against that information. And for us, the ambition with the Human ID is to say down the road, imagine it's not a Facebook login or a a Facebook Connect or a Google login, you know, where you're signing up into websites and applications and whatnot. We ultimately want to build out sort of a human ID. But the difference between a human ID and a Facebook Connect is that the information, number one, is verifiably true because there are, these are credentials being issued by trusted parties. Number two is that you as a user gets to connect and own this data so that nobody ever gets to see it without your permission. Right. And then the third thing, which is interesting, is we want to make sure that this almost becomes a complete data enrichment platform, right? So instead of just, maybe it's a Facebook Connect where they get an application might just get your email or your name. In this case, imagine an application that even might say, hey, you know what? If you prove that you're a millionaire, or if you go prove that you are a Marriott Bonvoy member, platinum status, you get certain discounts because you've shared this information. right? So earlier I was mentioning there's sort of fraud prevention, preventing scams, all that sort of stuff as one of the use cases. But down the road, we see ourselves as actually building a decentralized identity graph where everybody gets to own and control all the data that is verified about them, and they get to share it, whether it's because they need it from regulatory perspective, or maybe it's because they're incentivized to share it because they might get, you know, discounts, deals, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
back to what you were asking in terms of, sort of the Mastercard thing. I
Sure.
think it took quite a fair while. Historically they've on the data side of their company, they haven't worked with any blockchain companies before. Historically, it's mainly working with different sort of banks for sharing information. Maybe it's other financial institutions, in order for these institutions to be able to check for user data across intra banks. But what we managed to convince them is that this unlocks a massive opportunity, not just for sort of the Web3 space where a lot more finance is coming on chain, but also for sort of the Web2 space as we move into an AI world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to get a bit deeper into that because I think you hit two important points that you guys had in mind with this partnership, as well as in general, just with the philosophy that you guys carry at Humanity, which one being this user ownership of this identity layer, of this human ID, just of the general data that you own. And that's a big kind of theme here in this little sub show of our show here. That being the kind of number one, and then number two being privacy. When you're thinking about the kind of agentic future when it comes to identity, how do you envision this playing out with regards to this user ownership as well as privacy with regards to identity? Like, what is the future of digital identity right now? And are we set up right now to own it? And is it going to be private
I mean,
or
right now, I think right now it's not set up to. I think right now it's not set up for anybody to own it. Right? If you
okay?
think about who owns your identity right now, it's sort of big tech companies, right? You have your Facebooks, your Googles, your Apples, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the government issues you your passport, but they have far less information about you than your tech companies, right? Um, I think this actually poses a couple of different problems in the future. I think number one, as I said, there's the challenge of truth. Anybody can create any sort of account on any of these platforms in order to pretend to be somebody, or just feed it with fake information. The number two problem is that even if you're feeding it correct information, all of these tech companies do not actually have an incentive, um, because they've spent so much money and so much effort gathering this information from all of us. They don't really have an incentive to give you back the control over this data and identity, right? And it is absolutely in their interest to try to monetize this. And currently, it's largely being monetized through through advertising and attention, right? Essentially selling your attention to different companies that want to reach you, right? But as you're already seeing, like some of the AI companies are now taking this data, right? All the stuff that you're posting on Reddit, is being used for training LLMs on OpenAI, right? So I think for us, the whole idea is that there needs to be sort of a decentralized solution where people ultimately control all this data, and this data needs to be verifiably true. And so we actually think this is, in fact, a $1 trillion opportunity if you think about the size of, your Googles and your Metas currently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because right now the amount of funding that the let's call it like the centralized AI world has is probably 1,000x that of this kind of like decentralized AI world it has. And it seems like there's like this kind of altruistic kind of wanting to win for the people mentality with the decentralized AI folk. Whereas the centralized AI, they just want to keep shipping, scaling, get better products, better products, better products. Um, but we're kind of running into a headway here where OpenAI is set to go public at $1 trillion valuation, $1 trillion IPO. and Elon Musk and Sam Altman are feuding on the timeline about kind of what the future of AI is. They're going back and forth. Sam Altman's pulling back his Tesla order. Elon's freaking taking away power from Altman. There's just a whole kind of Genghis Khan versus Alexander the Great type of battle happening here. But I think that is even missing the forest from the trees, which is that if we can't figure out a way to make this kind of future more user owned and more private, then I think the ramifications for all of us are it gets dystopian quickly.
It gets dystopian very quickly. I was on an interview just 2 days ago with somebody else, and we actually think that the challenge is now this sort of AI revolution. It's getting into a even worse scenario of where uh, all of us are getting these dopamine hits because the technology is easy to use. We find it very useful, and historically, sort of similar to your iPhones, your Android phones, and your social media networks, where um, it's convenient, and so you're sort of willing to share everything with it, right? And then at this point, you're starting to see different sort of applications where people are connecting they're connecting their Gmail accounts, they're connecting their calendars, they're connecting all their messages, you know, and just sort of willingly hand that information over to tech companies that are working on supposed solutions or AI solutions for them, right? And so for us, we do think in terms of data privacy, in terms of identity, this is something that absolutely needs to be solved.
Blockchain shortcuts, templates, and widgets launch without friction for builders by builders. Visit enso.build. Asset management redefined, built on ERC 7621. Standardize how you launch, manage, and trade on-chain baskets. This is Alvara, the standard for on-chain asset management.
This is really a fork in the road because we're at a point now where these teams either get our data and they're going to try to monetize and profit off of it, or we have custody over our own data and we can choose what we do with it. So I'm somewhat concerned of the world where everyone gets a hold of our data, but also the idea of the world where we each have our own data, it's verifiable, and we can choose who to share that with, I think is extremely important. Um, but we've seen security leaks, hacks. I mean, for a long time, the reason that a lot of this is still on paper is because people are still somewhat skeptical of the internet and of databases. Because every once in a while we see this huge database leak. And so could you just tell us, like, how do you ensure that, this is secure? Walk us through what is it, ZK? Maybe you could just talk to us about the security of the protocol to kind of put our minds at ease, so that we can make sure that, when we're uh, giving someone access to our data, it only stays accessible by them.
Yeah, so what we're actually doing is we're not putting the data on chain, right? So what is actually happening
Yeah.
is a little bit similar to how your most, at least most tech companies where they are doing it correctly, they never see your password. They never, it's entirely encrypted, right? So, and it's not reversible without a key. So it's a little bit similar to that. Essentially, for any sort of data, any sort of credential that's being issued, the data is encrypted. What we do is we actually store it on decentralized storage. Right now, we've actually migrated. We also announced a partnership with Walrus, which is actually built on Sui, like a couple weeks back. And so the data is actually encrypted, stored on Walrus. And then what is happening is we're issuing credential on chain that represents some form of encrypted data. And then what we're doing is essentially using zero knowledge proofs to allow uh, a third party to be able to verify that this credential is valid, provided that the user gives permission. So at any point in time, uh, none of the data is on chain. The user ultimately gets to control the credential, and nothing can, there's no possibility of a data leak.
Yeah, that makes sense. I also think that there's incredible opportunities here. I was listening to the recent Elon Musk Joe Rogan podcast, and Elon makes a really strong emphasis for ultimate truth-seeking AI, right? And he sort of describes how Gemini, OpenAI, they have these implicit biases. They're, treating the founding fathers as these diverse women. And then if AI, is allowed to kind of think non-truths, well, there's a really, really dystopian scenario that results from that. And so we need a truth-seeking AI in order to combat those other AIs. If we have private AI, Near has been an incredible partner in this, as they have private and user-owned AI as well. I think, we're entering this world where AI agents are becoming more ingrained into commerce, and the agentic economy is becoming full force with X402 and MCP and all these protocols that link these things together. They're going to get access to our credit cards. Some of the time they're going to need our passport, they're going to need our driver's license, they're going to need our social security numbers. And so when it comes to AIs sharing data with one another, like how do you see this playing out in the agentic world? Do you see, I give my personal AI access to my data through human ID. Can that AI go and share my data with all of the other AIs? Like how do you see our data proliferating through the economy and through the internet as we kind of delve into this agentic world?
I think in the agentic world, I've sort of spent most of my time still focusing on sort of building the solutions for the human world. But we do the team does think a little bit about how this works and how this potentially could play into the agentic world. And you're right, right? The idea is that ultimately, the user, same thing, right? Needs to give permission to an AI agent in order to make use of that information. I think the challenge actually becomes when somebody not fully understanding the boundaries and the power of that AI agent shares that information, and as you said, maybe then that AI agent goes rogue and starts
Right.
blacking that out, right? And so one of the other things that we do think about is that down the road, because we've built essentially a blockchain for credentials,
Yeah.
there is an idea that there might even be identities and credentials being issued to AI agents
Right.
to sort of force some degree of responsibility between whoever created this agent and and the agent itself, right? So saying that, okay, you know what, this AI agent is running around going rogue, doing stupid shit, but at the very least, we can verify that, okay, the AI agent is technically created and operated by Andy, and so Andy should be held responsible, right? So I think these are sort of uncharted territories, um, at least for now. But I do think, whether it's us or whether it's somebody else, solutions need to be created pretty soon.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes complete sense. Terrence, do you have any stats? Like how many people have onboarded to the platform so far? How many data points have you collected? I mean, I have to. This is such an incredible TAM.
We have around 1.5 million people who have verified to be a human being on
Yeah.
humanity. We have I think just over around 10 million credentials that are being that have already issued. As I mentioned, the Mastercard on the banking or in financial services credentials. I don't know what the number is because it's the product has only gone live, I think, in the last 2 hours. But different sort of credentials in terms of socials, and even if you go to our web app, you already have the ability to prove out your a bunch of different things, right? Your travel status, your loyalty status.
Yeah.
We're rolling out KYC, nationality, education, all these sort of things very soon. And so we do think there's a massive addressable market for humanity.
In the Mastercard partnership, it's only been live 2 hours, right? So it's too early to tell how many users will be onboarded. But Mastercard has millions and millions of users, right? Almost everyone has a Mastercard credit card or is connected to someone that does.
No,
Will all of
this partnership is not just for anybody who has a Mastercard. This partnership to start is actually credential issuance for anybody who has a U.S. bank account.
right?
So technically it's all 300 something million people in the US who can be onboarded. And the goal for us is to actually allow for these credentials to be used in a wide range of applications Maybe it's, you signing up for crypto exchange, or maybe opening a bank account, or maybe it's getting a personal loan on chain or off chain. So it's many different types of use cases that we're enabling.
Does it onboard these guys by default, or does it just opens up access for them to onboard their banking details?
It opens up right now. Right now it opens up the ability for people to onboard their own banking details, and then
Got it.
for us, the goal is to allow different sort of companies to also make use of this to onboard users, right? As I mentioned, it might be you get what I'm saying, right? Like there might be a fintech that says, instead of me going out and KYCing every one of our users, why don't I just check if this person
Right.
is already onboarded, is KYC'd with one of the 25,000 US banks,
Yeah.
right?
This
So
is really
that's what we fundamentally enable.
this is really similar to the agentic use case. It's enabling second and third order effects of this data, right? Where banks can now access this data, and then those banks can go maybe, down the line to issuing loans. The data flow, the pipeline here ultimately starts with human. It starts with the individual, right? But then humanity is the one that sort of opens up this landscape and this world of partners that can then leverage and use this data in a very secure way.
Absolutely.
Well, Terrence, man, congratulations on the big day. I'm sure you're slammed. We're gonna let you go. Thanks for calling in, being a part of this.
Absolutely. Thanks
this
for having me.